Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to American Experiment Radio. Here we're going to be talking to Andy Koons, a genuine and grounded guy from the Kansas border, now settled in Michigan with his wife and three kids. Andy's a musician, logistics manager, and aspiring entrepreneur. His political journey has taken him from conservative roots to the far left, and ultimately he embraces libertarianism, and he's on here on American Experiment Radio to explain a little bit more about that to you now. So here he is, Andy Koons.
Bring him on, Andy Koons.
Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, dude. For sure.
Absolutely.
So, Andy, what sparked your love affair with libertarianism, and how has your political mindset transformed since then?
Whew. Okay, so to my close friends, libertarianism is just the most recent sort of crazy harebrained idea I've landed on, and it's whenever I moved up here to Michigan, I came from conservative roots, like you said. My mom and dad were a pastor and a nurse, and they were deeply conservative, like, George Bush all the way. Ronald Reagan was the greatest person that's ever lived. Those kind of conservatives. And so after I moved out, I rebelled hard, left religion behind, went super, super far to the left, like, communist, socialist, Marxist. I was left, and after the 2016 election, when Hillary lost, I was, and I'm going to pat myself on the back here a little bit. I didn't react how the rest of the leftists did, because as soon as Trump won, all of the left, simultaneously, it seemed, were like, this is all the fault of straight white men and blah 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 blah, and everybody was mad at straight America, everybody was mad at white America, and I was just like, that seems like a cop-out answer as to why Trump won this election, and as the months progressed after Trump was in office, just sort of the toxic ammunition that leftists were using against Trump supporters, saying that they were all Nazis, saying that they were all, white supremacists, and sort of these typical arguments that we hear against right wingers. And it just didn't sit well with me, because in my mind, I was like, well, there's the whole half of America that need to hear sort of this message about why social programs are good, and sort of all these left-wing values that I had. And I was like, I want to talk to people about this. I want to change their minds. I don't want to just write them off as being evil, because that's easy. That's an easy answer. And so I tried to understand why Trump got elected, and that got me listening to his speeches. That got me sort of really paying attention to him and what his supporters were saying and why his supporters were voting for him. And ultimately, I realized that, okay, well, corporate media has horrifically misrepresented this person. I'm still not a fan of Trump, but that has more to do with libertarianism than anything else. But yeah, I was like, the media horribly misrepresented this person. They lied about just about everything that came out of his mouth, and plus, these ideologues that were online were just saying some of the most vicious, ugly things about people that they just disagreed with politically. I remember seeing conversations online where people were saying, man, I wish it was legal to go out and kill Trump supporters. And that's when I was like, okay, that's a little excessive. And that was the first time I ever experienced like dogpiling online. And everyone was calling me a Nazi because I was saying that genocide was wrong. And so that was the first real experience that I had where I was like, maybe I'm not on the good guy team here. And so then I kind of got politically agnostic after that point, just kind of disassociated with all of it. But the thing that kind of roped me back into it was, even as a leftist, I grew up watching stand-up. I love comedy. And so I was really missing good comedy because the left doesn't have any. And so I kept hearing about this show called Legion of Skanks. And so I was like, well, I'm going to check this show out. fell in love with it. It's hilarious. Haven't laughed that hard in a while. And they keep referring to one of the hosts, Dave Smith, as this political guy, you know? And so I was like, well, I'll go check out his show because maybe he's got like a sensible left wing perspective. And, you know, they don't talk about politics on Legion of Skanks at all. And so I went and listened to an episode of Part of the Problem. And it was, I was extremely fortunate to land or to pick the episode that I did, because in that episode, Dave Smith explained libertarian philosophy like I had never heard it before. He explained it in a serious way. And because everything I'd heard about libertarians up until that point was, oh, well, libertarians are a joke, you know, and nobody took the idea seriously. You know, oh, these people don't want taxes, but they don't understand that taxes pay for blah, 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 blah. You know, sort of the smooth brained understanding of libertarianism. And so Dave Smith talks about what libertarianism is. And then he also talked about war. That was the thing that really was the hook for me, was talking about war and the war machine and the military industrial complex. And I remember the thing that he said that just hit me like a freight train was racism is bad, but war is worse. And he goes, if you look at the number of people who die from war versus the people who die from racism, those two numbers are incomparable. And he said that, and my sort of automatic gut reaction was, well, I need to find the left-wing counter argument to this. And I was sort of, you know, filing through everything that I knew, and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find a legit left-wing answer that satisfied me as to why racism was worse than war. And that really put things into perspective for me. I was like, oh, okay, well, why is everybody all up in arms about racism right now when there's 1 million Iraqis who died, you know, when there are people being genocided right now in Yemen because of American backing this Saudi genocide campaign, you know? And so it was probably by the end of that episode, after being sort of politically homeless for a couple of years at that point, to where I was just like, yeah, I think this is it. I think this is what I am. I think that this is sort of what I've needed as far as a political ideology, you know. And
Sure.
it sounds weird to call it an ideology because if you read something like Anatomy of the State, it is one of the greatest pieces of political literature ever written, in my opinion. I also talk in absolutes a lot. My bad. But that essay by Murray Rothbard is genius because the way he describes government are in strictly objective terms. You know, he doesn't leave anything to imagination. He explains taxes as it objectively is. He explains the military industrial complex as it objectively is. And so there's no way to argue against it because it's objective. And so whenever I kind of hit that bedrock philosophy of libertarianism, I was like, I can't argue against this. There's no way to argue against it in a way that makes sense. And so sorry, I know that was super, super long. I apologize, but
No
No,
worries.
yeah, that's how I landed
You're
where I
good.
am.
You certainly sound like you have very liberty-driven ideologies, and that kind of explains why you want to project these things out into the world and get other people to, you know, believe what you believe, because what you're saying is extremely thought out. It sounds like you put a lot of thought and effort into not only this pitch, but just the way you think about politics in the world in general, which is extremely refreshing.
Yeah.
Right.
So when it comes to making content and when it comes to breaking those things down and making it easier for the public to understand, what do you do in terms of your TikTok videos that make it easier for people to relate or get people to watch, or how do you break it down?
Well, whenever all of my TikToks are pre-written, you know, I write out a script, and I have a little bit of a history of writing sketch comedy. And so whenever I got the idea to start making TikToks, you know, for me, I'm the only person in my household who follows politics. I have hard opinions on stuff. I think about stuff. I read, and the rest of my family. My wife and her uncle who actually lives with us, and our kids. My kids are too busy being kids. My wife is too busy being a mother, and her uncle is too busy being my kid's favorite uncle for any of them to care enough about politics. But me, I'm obsessed with it. And so um, I don't have anybody to talk to in my house about all this stuff, whether it's gun rights or legalizing drugs or anything political. I don't have anybody to talk to. And so I was like, well, I need some kind of outlet for this stuff.
Right.
I got it. I'll start making TikTok videos. It'll give me a place to get all of this stuff out of me. And then I can, maybe somebody in the comments, I can talk to them, and
Right.
so I just started my very first video was called "Don't Trust the Cops," and then after that, that one actually did pretty well for it being my very first video, and I think I wound up getting like a couple thousand views that night that I posted it. And for me, who's never had much of any online presence anywhere, I was like, "This is huge." And so I started writing more scripts, and then got the idea where like, well, maybe I should find somebody else to do this with, so I can write out these skits. And of course, I don't know anybody who's super obsessed with politics, and so I was like, well, I'll just play both characters. I've seen a few people on TikTok do this, and so then I had a creative outlet for comedy, I had a creative outlet for politics, and I'm starting to I'm going to be starting to transition my TikTok to putting more of my music out, because I've been writing music for forever,
Right.
and so
One quick thing. Sorry.
yeah.
I'm just like I'm getting like attracted by your like background. So what is? Don't mean to interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
what is that you got? What is your background? Because I'm kind of
So
curious.
it says "We Love the State." This is the logo for my podcast.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. So is there any
I can
meaning
turn
to
it
that?
off if you want.
No, no, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
What is the meaning behind that? And
Well, it's my co-host Ben DeYoung and I are both libertarian anarchists, and we both have a pretty tongue-in-cheek sense of humor, and
right.
so we love the state is our way of kind of making a joke, as a title. It's
Right.
a podcast with two anarchists on a show called We Love the State,
Yeah,
Interesting.
so
fair
Gotcha.
yeah,
enough.
we had a guy on Fiverr who actually made this for us, and then they saw my Twitter feed, and they wrote us back and they're like, "I'm sorry, I can't do any more business with you."
So
That's
how did
funny.
you become friends with Spike Cohen?
So that all started from there was a comment on one of my videos where somebody had tagged Spike Cohen, and he liked that video. And so after that, it sort of became this joke in the comments of my videos about like, I'm friends with Spike Cohen. And so then I got this idea to write out this skit where after Spike started following me, I get like super obsessed, like, oh my gosh, Spike followed us on TikTok. That's amazing. That basically means we're best friends. And like those three videos that are in that sort of Spike Cohen is my best friend series, if that's what you want to call it. Whenever I wrote that first one, that's when me and Spike actually started talking to each other, because he went and commented on it, and then we started messaging back and forth on TikTok. And and after I wrote that second one, he was like, "Dude, that's so funny." And so I messaged him because I was going to Reno for the Libertarian National Convention, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to meet up and make a TikTok together?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And let me tell you, Spike is one of the coolest, nicest people I've ever met in my life. He
Yeah.
and his wife both are just you just can't help but love them when you're around them, because they just radiate kindness all the time, and just really decent human beings, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah, dude. So since you were talking to yourself, that you have 3 kids, you have a wife, right?
Mhm.
How do you manage all these things, right? You have like a bunch of responsibilities, and you got like your podcast and politics, and you're into politics a lot.
Mhm.
So how do you like balance things out? How do you go about all that stuff?
Well, I have I guess four major responsibilities outside of my family, and that is, I have a full-time job. I'm also starting a media marketing company with some other content creators.
There you go.
And then I have my podcast and I have my TikTok. And so there's not a ton of free time, but one of the agreements that my wife and I had is like there needs to be 2 days a week where I block everything out, and
Right.
I get to spend that time with my family, you know?
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
So
That's
sometimes
a
those days aren't always the same, but
Whew.
every week there's two
Well,
days where
that puts a heavy load on them other 5 days, though, don't it?
oh, it does. Don't get me wrong.
No, it's always good to have a time to rest, right? From all
Yeah.
of your work and all that stuff. So yeah, no, I get it, dude. That's
Mhm.
cool.
Well, one of the guys that one of my business partners, his name is Mike Grappel, and he's from the Fundamental Opposites podcast, which is way more intellectual than what me and Ben do on We Love the State. And Mike is a super, super smart guy. So that's a podcast for everybody to check out as well, as Fundamental Opposites. But he was the one that told me, he's like, yeah, my wife wants me to have 2 days where I'm not doing, either political stuff or work stuff or, podcast stuff. And I'm like, that's a really good idea. And so I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, what 2 days is going to work best for us? And, you know, like I said, sometimes it shifts around, but
Right.
every week there's 2 days that I'm devoting to her and the kids.
That's
Yeah,
good.
and we both know. I mean, everybody here at American Experiment Radio knows that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to put. It takes a lot of money, time, and effort to make content and to put out
Right.
content.
Right.
And you
Oh
put
yeah.
out content. So, are there any words of wisdom you would have for libertarians looking to put out more content? And also, since your specialty is in comedy, is there anything that people can do to just insert comedy into it? To just make it interesting. Tricks you've learned since doing this, said you'd like to drop some gems on us in regards to
Oh
that.
yeah. Comedy is
Uh,
I think humor is very important.
Yeah.
so, and I hope this doesn't come across as like pretentious, but like, whenever it comes to comedy, there's something about comedy that the reason that you're laughing is because of the tiny grain of truth that's inside whatever silly absurd thing somebody just said or did. um a lot of stuff, if a comic is on stage and says something horrible, then if it's funny, it's usually because it's a thought that everybody has had, and it might not be true, but everybody has had that thought, and uh I mean, that's what makes it funny, is that it's relatable. So whenever I'm writing a script for TikTok, where I usually try to insert the humor, is in the objectivity of what I'm saying. And
So
that's
you
part
like so
where
you
I'm
base your comedy in somewhat of a basis of truth because what's true actually is kind of the funniest thing of all.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, um so whenever I'm explaining to there was for example, there was a TikTok that I did where one of the characters was the government, and one of the other character was somebody who's never heard of government, and the government is trying to explain taxation to this person who's never heard of government or the social contract before. And so uh the government says like, hey, do you have a job? And the other guy's like, yeah, I do. And he's like, oh, cool, I'm gonna have to take 40% of your income. And he's like, why? And I mean, so like there's sort of like a funny back and forth that goes on between them. But the thing is that there's no lies being told, and everything about what the government says it's going to do is true. We are going to come after you for your money, regardless if you use our services or not. And, I guess where the funny comes in is that, when you explain it in a certain way, you see it for how absurd and ridiculous it is,
Yeah.
And
like
so
if
that,
somebody, like in a vacuum, if somebody were to come up and tell me, hey, like, let's say I'd never heard of the Constitution before. Let's say I'd never heard of, forget about the Constitution. Let's say I were not even familiar with Western society in general. And you were just going to come up and tell me you're taking 40% of my income,
yeah,
in a country that's not
you'd
already
punch him in the
communist,
face.
like North Korea or Russia or these other places, you come up and tell me that in a society like Dubai, which has a 0% tax rate, zero,
Mhm.
they're not going for it. I mean,
Yeah.
most people would think this is ludicrous that they're taking this much money from us.
Mhm.
There's no amount of good that the government could do for me for 40% of my income. There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do for me for that much,
Mhm. I mean, if you look at the things that the government are the least bad at, and there's a reason that I explain it that way is because they're still pretty freaking bad, at the thing that they're their best at, they're still pretty awful at it. Take something like police work, that's, we don't have a whole lot of outside references to compare the US, the government's police force to like a private security force, working on like a larger scale like the police do. But like,
Sure.
even that, like I was in a situation, and this is actually the situation that turned me pro 2A, because I was a leftist when this happened. There was a ex coworker from my old job who like lost his stuff and went off the deep end and threatened me, threatened my family, and I called the cops, got them involved in everything. And it was 4 days later that I got any sort of a resolution from the police. And the resolution was, there's not a lot we can do, you know? And they're like, he didn't make, a legitimate threat. And I'm like, look at these are the text messages of him threatening me. Like, there they are right in front of your stupid cop faces. And they're just like, yeah, I'm sorry, he didn't break any laws. There's nothing we can do. And so I remember being on that phone call, getting off the phone, turning around and looking at my wife, and I was like, I'm buying a gun. Because first of all, it took them like, after the first time I called them, it took them like 2 hours to call me back, and and there was zero resolution. And I was like, this dude knows where I live. Like, basically what they told me is, well, if he contacts you again, then you can file a PPO. And then if he violates that PPO, then we can go after him. And I was like, awesome. So I have to deal with him 2 more times before there's anything you can do.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah.
Oh boy.
And I was like, cool, I'm buying a gun.
There's the overall ineptitude of most law enforcement nowadays, but there's also the fact that, there's also the thought contradiction of, you don't like to have guns, you don't believe in guns, but at the same time, when there's an issue, the first thing you do is call a person with a gun.
Yeah.
To help. Like,
well, and that experience right there was, all of a sudden everything became clear. I was like, this is why people own guns. This is why people are so adamant about them, because I was completely helpless to do anything to protect my wife and kids, and that's why, like, my Twitter is locked right now because I was verbally abusing David Hogg. But like, I've become such a pro 2A nut because of that experience that I had. And so it's like,
Oh yeah.
I at this point, like, I was at a counter protest in Lansing, Michigan. And it was on the same day that David Hogg was having his protest. And there's all these pieces of legislation that they're trying to push through right now. I think there's 12 bills total that have something to do with restricting firearms. And so David Hogg held this protest on the Capitol steps, and we held a counter protest like a block away. And so I was one of the people there. Me and Ben live streamed it. I gave a little bit of a speech, and I flat out told people, I was like, if they pass any of these laws, just ignore them, keep your guns. Like,
Yep.
break the law. This is what the Second Amendment is about, is because that is abuse. They know it's abuse. They know it's unconstitutional. They do not care. They want to disarm
Right.
you. They do not want you to be able to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that goes back to what you said earlier about having, when you decided to get your own gun, like sometimes you are the first responder, right?
Yeah.
What if
Every time you're the first responder.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So like when something goes down and you're over here like relying on the government or the cops, they're not going to save you if you don't know how to defend yourself.
Mhm.
You know, you're going to be waiting um 15, 30 minutes or whatever the case may be. You'll be dead by then if it
Mhm.
were like something life threatening, right?
Yeah.
So no, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah. And
So,
it's
let
not,
me,
and it's, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you a quick question just off
Yeah.
the top. How do you feel about people who have committed crimes and went to jail and then have gotten out and have, essentially paid their debts to society? Do you think their firearms rights should be restored?
Absolutely. Well, okay, so one thing that sort of anti-gun people and even a lot of quote unquote pro 2A people say is that, like, oh, well, you give up your rights if you go to prison or if you commit a felony. Well, it's like, okay, first of all, look at the Constitution of the United States. They say they claim that your rights are self-evident, all right, which is 17th century language or 18th century language, excuse me, for saying duh. Like, these are obvious, these are plain as day, these are objective rights. You objectively have a right to defend yourself, so the people who are like, well, yeah, you can defend yourself, but it doesn't have to be with an AR-15. It's like, well, the government has AR-15. The government has M14s and uh, I'm not super well versed on every kind of firearm that the government has or that soldiers have, but like, they have much more powerful weapons than I can go and buy at the local sports store. Much more powerful weapons, much more powerful than my 9mm, much more powerful than an AR-15, much more powerful than my 12 gauge. They have guns that could blow me in half. And so why does the government have a right to protect themselves at a better capacity than I do? And so if the government has fighter jets, F-22s, if they have battleships, I have the right to have those too, because no government should have the right to be able to hold a bigger stick against me. Because how, like, that's basically saying, like, you can protect yourself from certain people, but you can't protect yourself against others. You can protect yourself from those people, but you can't protect yourself from us. And that's what's really scary. So it's like, one of my other business partners, his name is RJ Evans, and he runs the Who Touched the Thermostat podcast. He makes merch, he makes t-shirts, and they're very thought-provoking, and he's really good at coming up with angles on certain topics that are a little bit provocative, but they draw your attention and they make you want to ask questions. And so, and I should have worn it tonight, but he has a shirt that says normalize civilian owned fighter jets,
Hmm.
and just seeing that, like, out in the open, you'd be like, fighter jets, like, I want to talk to this person, like, what do they mean do they really think that people should own a fighter jet? But it's not in your face and dismissive, like, F you if you don't like guns or something like that. It's, we should normalize civilian owned fighter jets. That's an interesting path to go down. He's really good at stuff like that. And that's one of my favorite shirts that I own, because it makes my point for me. Why should the government own something that could completely destroy me, but I can't own something that can defend myself against that?
Word.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Definitely.
no. So I know you do music. You're a
Mhm.
musician yourself.
Yeah.
Do you what is that all about? Do you put in your political views into your music, and or
Yeah. So,
let's hear a little bit about it.
okay. So, So I've been writing music since I was, I think the first song I wrote was when I was 9. It was really
Oh, wow.
bad. Uh, and then whenever I was 16, I got my first guitar, and that's when I really started writing structured songs and really starting to figure out more of the theory side of things. I never took any like formal training classes or anything like that. You know, I never had somebody teach me how to play. I just got a guitar and started messing with it. And eventually I was like, oh, if I do this with my hand, I can make this sound. And if I do this, I can make this other sound. And so I really started seriously writing music when I was 16 and wrote a couple albums, never released them because again, they were terrible. Um, and then it was, I would say about 3 years ago, I started writing a concept album called God Emperor. And that was that was really where I put a lot of my sort of anger and rage politically. I sort of funneled all of that into music. You know, all the things that I think are funny and absurd, I put that into TikTok, but all the things that really make my blood boil, I put that into the music because it's very heavy metal and it's very angry and it's very chaotic and you know, whenever it comes to heavy metal, I'm like, well, there are plenty of things to be angry about. Let's put that into music because one thing that the liberty sphere is missing is art. You know, uh, the right sucks at art. The left has all the art, and art is one of the things that most drives culture. And so, I want to build libertarian culture. I want to build, you know, free culture. And so, in order to do that, I have to start making that culture. You know, um, I think, and maybe I don't know, maybe this will be controversial, but uh, we're not going to get anywhere uh, running elections. You know, we're not. You know, we're too small. Everything is rigged way too much against us, and a lot of a lot of people don't understand libertarian philosophy because there are a lot of questions that people have, and you have to think these are people who are generation after generation after generation after generation of some sort of dependency on the government, you know. And so uh we're talking almost a century, I would say, at least since 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was signed. um the state has been really working hard to brainwash its population. And so when you have 110 years of brainwashing, you're going to get people who react like almost phobically to the idea of there being no government. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So we need to build culture. We need to show people like not only is liberty possible, but it's cool. You know,
Yeah.
it's
If you look at the way that either the right or the left took the culture over the course of history, whenever they have done that,
Mhm.
when you were saying back in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was established or whatever
Yeah.
else, I feel like it really doesn't have anything to do with that because no matter who's in power, whether it be the left or the right, it's always the same powers that be, as you just mentioned, the Federal Reserve, the people who
Right.
control those things who are actually the ones in power.
Mhm.
Because the left used to stand for something else. They actually flipped platforms back in the 60s and 70s, and they were whether or not whatever song and dance that they put on, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, when
Yeah.
whoever's controlling things at the end of the day, you know, whatever song and dance they put on for you, they can put this mask on, take it off, put this one on. They're
Yeah.
still going to be controlling things at the end of the
Mhm.
day, right?
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying when the only way that they ever took that was to take the culture to begin with. You got to
Yeah.
take the entertainment industry. Well, you don't have to take it. You just have to be more entertaining than the next guy. You have to tell people, you know, what their hearts desire, what their hearts want to hear. What you know, a lot of the left, you know where the left is losing this battle right now. They're putting people out in front of us who aren't funny. They're telling us comedians they're not making me laugh.
Yeah.
I'm not laughing. Nobody's laughing. It's
Yeah.
all trash. You know, so I understand what you're saying. If you can definitely bring that back into libertarianism, which is sort of absent in a sense, that's fair. I mean, it's definitely a goal to push forward
Yeah.
towards for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, um, as far as building culture, something that I've been able to do since I was 16 is write a song. I've been writing metal songs for 17 years. And so it's like, it's something that I don't know if you want to call it a gift or a talent or whatever, but like that's something I know I can do. I can make jokes and I can write metal songs. I can't do like open heart surgery. That's not
Yeah,
something I can do, but I can do this other thing. And so uh, I'm going to do that to the best of my abilities, and I'm going to put a positive message in there. And maybe this is because I was raised by a pastor and grew up in church and stuff, but it's kind of like witnessing. It's kind of like going out and spreading the gospel, except instead of it being religious, it's about, hey, do you know that the ATF set a building on fire with like 84 people still inside? Did you know that? Okay, well, here's a song about it. You know, did you know that that the ATF also uh, killed a 14-year-old boy's dog and then shot him, and then later shot his mom, and then later shot his dad's friend? And it's like, you can tell all these stories, and you can use some of those really bad things to push a positive message of like, we don't need them. You can take care of yourself.
sure. But there would be no room to push this message if everybody already knew about these things. And these are the
Mhm.
important things that a lot of people should be talking about, but are being shut out due to agendas. People
Right.
not hear certain things, people not wanting to say certain things. I mean, it's really sad. I mean, as a people, we all should be pulling together as opposed to be pushing each other apart. But man, that is pretty.
Well, one of my favorite things about libertarianism is that, like, we can come together if you want, but if you want to push people away, like, that's also fine, you know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's like the anti-collectivist aspect of libertarianism is one thing that, like, whenever I first started learning about it, that was one thing that was made apparent to me. Is like, okay, well, this is like the libertarian answer to racism, is that racism is like, it's collectivism, you know? And if you're grouping people as a collective, or if you're acting as a collective, or assuming that somebody else is part of a collective, like, that's not good, you know? And so, like, to be libertarian is to not give a shit about people's race. And I know that makes me sound woke or something like that, but I I don't know. Like, I don't care. Maybe I sound woke for that, but I don't know. I also have really bad ADHD, so I'm just going off in
No
a random
worries.
direction.
No worries.
That's fair enough. What do you have anything else to add, Hux? I think I went through the stuff that I wanted to ask. Do you have anything else, or
Yeah, sure. So um sorry. So I know you deal with a lot of we know that you deal with a lot of people with different political views and different walks of life and all that stuff. Like, how do you go about um how do you go about talking with different people with different views, and how do you, like, deal with people per se?
So the person that I am on Twitter is not the person that I am in real life. So on Twitter, I uh am vicious, and like, I'm I I make a lot of jokes on Twitter, and if I'm dealing with somebody who's, super far leftist or something like that, I'm rarely nice to them, But uh if I'm talking to somebody face to face, or if I'm on a Zoom call with somebody or whatever it is, if I'm talking to them as a person, like, I'm not going to say like, "Oh, you're pro-choice. That means you hate babies and you want all babies to die." Like, that's I'm not going to talk like that to them. I'm going to be like,
right?
okay, like, I
Yeah.
have family members who are
Well,
pro-choice.
to be honest, I'm a bit snippier online myself. Like
Yeah,
myself.
I think most people are. You know,
Yeah.
it also has to do with, like, the way that somebody will come to me. Like, if I tweet something about taxation or whatever, and someone's like, "Actually, sir, they don't have to call me sir, but if they're like,
Yeah.
I actually disagree with this and here's why, then I would be like, okay, like I
Yeah.
can have back and forth with that person.
Yeah.
But if someone's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're one of those taxation is theft neo-Nazi weirdos, then I'm like, you
Yeah.
can go die in a hole and I don't
Yeah.
care about you, you know?
Uh,
But like, but like whenever, if I'm talking to somebody in real life, then, you know, I try to be open-minded and realize that, you know, this is a person with a totally different background than me. They don't know where I come from. I don't know where they come from. I'm not going to make any assumptions about them. And also, I'm very I'm very nice in real life. I'm constantly trying to make people laugh. And so even if it's somebody that I know I disagree with, I'm going to try to make them laugh, you know? And so that usually is pretty disarming for most people. And so then we can have a conversation um, about our political differences. And usually, I mean, I remember at my old job there was a girl who was very super far on the left, and me and her, we would have political conversations all the time, and we knew that we disagreed. And but I think the main thing is that like uh we could find some common ground, you know. I would tell her like, yeah, Biden is in my opinion an evil president, and so was Barack Obama, you know. And I know those are two of the shining stars of the Democratic Party. In it, but I'll be like, and here is why. It's because of war. It's because of what they have done with the military industrial complex. I also don't like Trump, and I don't like Bush, and I don't like Cheney, and I don't like Hillary Clinton, and I don't like John Bolton. All the people that you also hate, I hate them too. And it's because of war, you know? And so you can find common ground issues like that with anybody from any political uh background, you know. And you can really use that as an opportunity to say like, you know, I don't like Trump, but they're for much better reasons than most Democrats out there. Most Democrats out there, they don't like him because of Mexicans are rapists or because of some of the other boisterous things that he said. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Did you also know about what is going on in Yemen? Did you also know that he made a deal with the Saudi Arabian government to help
Also, I
them?
mean, I mean, I can make an argument for the red flag laws and everything else, but that's neither here nor there, you know.
A pro argument or an anti argument?
No, the anti-argument.
Oh, okay, okay.
The bump stock. He was for bump stock
The bump
bans.
stocks, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of criticism that Trump deserves, and if he gets carted off to jail because of this indictment, then that it'll be an excellent opportunity to say, yeah, he should be in prison, but not for this Stormy Daniels nonsense. This is stupid. There's all these other
Right.
things, you know, and that can lead into a conversation of like, you know, he should be in prison for what he's doing with Yemen. And if you can get somebody on the left to be like, yeah, you're right, that's horrible. He's backing Saudi Arabia, who is committing this genocide. We're refueling their jets, we're training their pilots, all this stuff. Yeah, that's horrible. Did you know that Barack Obama started that? That
Right.
that is a jolt to the system. You know,
Sure.
that's
And if
a
you want to
Oh
get
whoa.
yeah.
into the weeds about war crimes in Yemen and other things like that, that's one thing. But don't give me Stormy Daniels when you want to talk about incarcerated
Yeah. Yeah.
president. Don't give me that.
He paid a porn star to not tell anybody
I
that
don't.
they slept together. What kind of nonsense is this? Like that's
It's so
it,
random.
it is.
That's crazy. Yeah, I know. So I noticed in your bio you got the word zip and zorp on there. What does that have any? What does that mean? Does that have any meaning, or is it just something random?
Whenever I was uh making my TikTok account, it asked me what my pronouns were, and I was like,
Oh,
well, I'm not taking this question seriously. And so I threw zip and zorp in there.
You have your own pronouns now, and
I
I mean,
do.
plus side, you literally invented them. So
You
now
can't you can't take all the leftism out of me. I still have to post my pronouns.
that's funny.
that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, no. You got any more questions for Andy, Jonathan?
Uh, I mean, I hit him with everything I had over here. I guess
Right.
that's it.
I'm
Yeah.
5'9", if that's something that you guys are wondering.
Oh,
No, we
5'9"?
weren't. We were not wondering that.
All right.
It's okay. No, everyone's. You don't know anyone's height. We're not talking about heights here. Not that I'm sure or anything. I'm not sure, but
I am.
cool.
All right, guys. I guess that's going to be it today on American Experiment Radio with Andy Koons. Everybody, thanks for watching, and stay tuned.
Yep. Thank you for being on, Andy.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.